Hi guys, Jessica here from the Healing Hands Duo, and today I have a very special guest with us and somebody who is very dear to my heart. Several years ago, I consulted with this person specifically on the recommendation through one of my other practitioners that I was dealing with at the time. I had realized, and it actually, to be honest, it wasn't entirely my realization, but I guess it was this practitioner who had realized that there were things that I needed to deal with at an emotional and a spiritual level. So you've often heard me refer to her as my spiritual healer or counselor, because that's what she means to me. However, she does not necessarily classify herself as a spiritual healer, and we will get into that. But several years ago, what I realized was that I was really trying to tackle my chronic illness at multiple different levels, but I was only dealing with the actual physical aspects of my illness, and I was really neglecting my mental and spiritual energy blocks, is what I like to call them. I am a strong believer that anybody struggling with a chronic illness is holding on to past traumas, and I believe these are things that we should address up front before even perhaps getting into all the other stuff, whether you decide to go with a holistic or a natural approach or even a conventional approach. I think a lot of us get stuck in believing that we are completely fine when maybe that isn't necessarily the case. And I think when you hold on to these energy blocks, you literally place these energy blocks in different parts of your body, and over time can cause illness or disease in that specific area. So when I consulted with her about 2 to 3 years ago, my first session with her was very profound. By the end of the session, she had me regress back into a specific trauma that I hadn't really put too much thought into it anymore, or at least I didn't think it was really bothering me. But she had actually got me into other things, and again, this is all entirely up to your belief system and what is going to make sense for you, but I was regressed back to past lives as well. And I realized there was a lot of stuff that I needed to let go of there. And I realize now that that's probably why I wasn't able to move on past a certain point with my illness. Like I said, at the end of the session, she had me in tears, and not in a bad way. These were things that I needed to address. And after that, she has forever changed my life, which is why I continued to work with her for 2 to 3 years after this initial session. I realized for a long time I was kind of living a lie or a facade. Being the people pleaser that I am, I was too afraid to let people really in on who I was or what I was passionate about. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that I was afraid that people weren't going to like me. But after dealing with and working with her, this particular person, I realized that if people didn't like the true me, then people didn't like me. And the only thing that really matters is that I liked myself. And that was something that she made me realize about myself as well, that I needed to learn how to accept myself, let go of some of the things that I was holding on to in order to allow my spirit to grow. So again, I thank her so much for that. I don't think anybody else has been able to do this. I did seek out other practitioners in this particular line of work, and nobody was able to get me where I needed to go. Spiritual healing or healing the spirit is all entirely up to you, but sometimes it does really help to work with somebody, especially if this is an area that you're not very comfortable with, like I was. I wasn't comfortable discussing my emotions. I wasn't comfortable discussing emotional traumas, and that's pretty much the gist of it. I just wasn't comfortable, but she didn't force me into that area, but let's just say she eased me into that area. And again, I will forever be grateful to her for doing that. Last but not least, before I introduce my guest, the other thing that she was able to do with me is help me get past some of my fears, which is entirely why this particular platform exists. My YouTube channel was something that I was able to go ahead with after I spoke to her for the first time back in January of 2000, I believe it was in 2017, is when I started filming, and I decided that I was going to share our experience. So again, without her, this channel probably wouldn't exist either. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that it's really important to work past your fears. If that means getting up in front of a camera, then that's something that you have to do, or discussing your past, then that's just something you have to do, or if it even means consulting with somebody on a mental as well as a physical and spiritual level in order to help you work past some of those particular past traumas or energy blocks within the body. So with that said, let's get into this interview and let me introduce you to my guest. Welcome, Susan. I'm so glad you could be here with us today. I know you have a really busy schedule and you flew in from BC probably about a week ago now. So thank you so much for putting some time aside to be with us here today.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's true an honor to be here and sit down with you. I have really enjoyed watching you flourish into the person that you are today, and your focus on health and wellness and all this great incentive that you're putting out there for people to manage their own health and wellness. So it's a real treat for me to be here, and you're truly an inspiration. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. So I think the first thing that I kind of wanted to touch base with you is that I kind of in the past have always called you a spiritual healer or my counselor. And I think the reason for that is because Kevin and I have been working with energy on so many different levels, as well as electromedicine. So I kind of coined you that maybe 2 or 3 years ago when we started working with you, but I know that's not necessarily what you call yourself. So if you were to actually tell people what it is that you kind of do, as well as what your job title really is.
Well, there are many different names or labels that can be used when you're working within the umbrella of energy medicine, but I call myself a holistic energy practitioner.
Okay.
And the reason why I do that is because holistic, part and parcel, is because I'm working with a person on a holistic level. I'm looking at all aspects of them.
Right.
So there are physical issues, mental issues, emotional issues, and even spiritual, the stuff that we don't see. And we're not just working with what keeps going through the brain or the conscious awareness. We're digging into the subconscious. We're looking at what's happening in the present to affect the future. We're also looking at what's happened in your past to affect your present.
Right.
So the holistic aspect, we're looking at everything. There's no stone that's unturned. The energy part of it is that we are using energy medicine to actually address the issue. So some people like calling me, their counselor or their therapist.
And I think that's where that's where I've gone into it, because like I said, in the past we've just had so many different people that we've either consulted with, and then once we started doing the electromedicine, I kept kind of saying that was energy medicine, so I had to correct myself and say, no, that's electromedicine. What we do is energy medicine. And of course, when people ask me, like I said, I would just be like, well, I'm just going to point her into my spiritual healer, because I didn't know what else to kind of call you at that point. So
yeah, and that's the beauty. There's so many new tools that are surfacing now for people to address certain things that are going on in their lives.
Right.
So yes, I do help people move through certain things, and that's kind of the practitioner part. Some people say, well, I've saved years of therapy, coming to you for 1 or 2 sessions. Right. So there's definitely that aspect that I help people with as well. So that's kind of what I call myself in a nutshell. But sometimes I just, people come to me for consultations, and that's what I offer them. But the nice part is that there's always energy moving. So whether we're conversing or we're in a formal session, I'm always working with the underlying energy of what's beneath the surface. So we all have this ability. It's all in us. We can develop it. It's like strengthening a muscle, or it's learning a new skill. I, for one, did have, some people might call it a little bit of psychic abilities when I was a child, but they were never nurtured. So they were quite suppressed. And it's interesting how life will present certain opportunities for you when a new door is ready to be opened. Right. So, way back when I was in the corporate world and, leading kind of the 9-to-5 hustle bustle life, and I was quite stuck in the rat race. And, there's a series of events that kind of led me to discovering what energy medicine was all about. And quite often when we get stuck with a particular circumstance or an ailment in our lives, we think, oh my gosh, what is this all about? So for me, we went on a trip to Europe, and it was a simple cold or flu that I picked up, which turned into a chest infection. And I went to the doctor, and they said, oh, you've got asthma. Here's a puffer for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And that just didn't sit well with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to see a practitioner who specialized in energy medicine, and she was actually able to work on the virus that I had at an energetic level.
Right.
To clear that.
So beautiful.
I
love it. I absolutely love it. I love all of it.
So when I look back, it was a beautiful thing that I picked up this chest infection.
Right.
Because had I not, I would never have discovered this whole new world that exists out there.
Right.
So the more that I kind of learned about it, the more it piqued my interest and my curiosity, and I was starting to take more and more courses. And a lot of people, we can openly talk about Reiki now, which is an ancient Japanese healing art. But back then, like decades ago, people hadn't heard of it. But that was kind of the door opening for me.
Right.
And I started taking level 1 and level 2, and it just strengthened my intuition every step of the way. And that led from one course to another.
Which is really funny that you would even say that, because I think the first time I even consulted with you, which I was very skeptical kind of about what you were doing in the beginning, but I was actually led to you by another practitioner who I have a lot of respect for. And he had said to me, I think we've done as much as we can do, and I think you need to see Susan now. It's this time. And I think for me, what he had saw that I couldn't see at the time, but I obviously can see now, is that a lot of the stuff that I was holding on to from the past, like traumas and stuff like that, or these energy blocks, were something that I really needed to lift in order to kind of see past some of my chronic illnesses. And I think a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of that, or they're always addressing the physical aspects of their illness. Mm-hmm. And then they get to a place where there's like a roadblock, because at this point people really need to address the body, the mind, and the spirit as a threesome, I would say, or as a holy trinity, in my opinion. And I think with you really opened my eyes to all of that, which is funny that you say Reiki, because I had actually seen somebody else, and they told me, oh, I think you have the ability to be a Reiki healer. And then I saw you, and I kind of asked you about that in the very first one. You were like, oh, just hold up, something else will come. And to be honest, I think the YouTube channel was something else to come. And I really do thank you for that. And because I would have never had the bravery to do this. Public speaking is that's my absolute fear. And I realized in order to work past some of these things, I needed to deal with these things in order to get past even my illness. I felt like a lot of stuff was being pent up in the things that I wanted to talk about, and being my true self, which unfortunately, I'm a people pleaser. For many years, I would just attempt to do the things that people wanted me to do instead of be the person that I truly wanted to be. So I do want to thank you for that. And I think that's what I was able to get past working with you. But what can people kind of expect when they consult with you? Like, what should they expect, both emotionally, physically, mentally? The whole works. What can they really expect from seeing you?
Well, that's a great question, because often a lot of people come to see me when they are stuck.
Right.
So when they've tried many different things and they're spinning their wheels and they're frustrated because there's a part of their life that just isn't moving forward. So that can be, dealing with anxiety issues or depression issues or other physical ailments, or just not feeling fulfilled in life. And so the beauty of this work is that you don't have to identify what your issue is in order to deal with it.
Right.
Because what happens is quite often people will say to me, I'll just use an example. Somebody will come to me and say, I've got a headache.
Right.
And I get these headaches. Well, we are very complex beings. Like, yes, there's the physical part of us. And we address that part. We address the things that the mind understands. but also our limitations lie in our mind.
Yeah.
Because our mind is like a database.
Right.
So it can only take us to what it knows, what it's stored in its database. So if you think of like a rock formation and the different intricacies, and if you pour water in a rock formation, that water is going to find its own way and path around that rock formation to get into every crack and every crevice.
Right.
That's kind of what we do in an energy session. That energy is going to find the path of least resistance to help clear whatever is sitting in those cracks and crevices. And that can be from circumstances in this lifetime, it can be stresses, it can be relationships, it can be traumas, it can be things that are sitting in your subconscious that the brain isn't even aware of.
Which I really like that you're mentioning that, because I'm watching a lot of things on YouTube now, and a lot of people have all these terms for everything that they're doing, especially I've noticed with scientists and stuff like that. They have these logical terms like family imprinting or family DNA imprinting and stuff like that, but really all in all, it's just energy work is what these people are doing. And I think it's important to perhaps address even this up front, especially if you're dealing with a chronic illness and stuff like that, to address this maybe first and foremost before anything else. Because I know personally for myself, I wasn't able to do this on my own because I wasn't even aware of the things that were bothering me. I mean, I knew that they were there. And when you did the first session that we did together, I literally left your office in tears, kind of. And I had actually just thought to myself, I didn't think these things were bothering me anymore. I thought I had dealt with them when I was younger. And of course, there were things that we talked about that didn't even happen in this particular lifetime. But it all made so much sense to me.
Let's go back to the rock analogy, because we are a lot like sediment. So if you look at how rocks kind of form and sediment kind of creates, you can see layers that have built up. That's how we are as well, because we are energy beings. Every part of us is an energy field. And so our physical bodies are the densest part of that energy field. But everything that we accumulate gets stored in this energy field. So it's like layers and layers of sediment that has built up.
Right.
So when we're dealing with family lineage patterns or certain behavioral issues that we've accumulated and kind of defined and made our own in this life, what we're actually dealing with is energetic patterns.
Right.
So it's no different than, oh, you know what, you're going to have blue eyes because that's part of your heritage.
Your code, yeah.
Well, you're going to have the same lineage energetically as well. So things get passed on. So that's why sometimes you might be dealing with certain issues in this lifetime that might not even be yours.
Right.
They can be generations up the line, but you're dealing with all the residual.
Right.
So that's the beauty of energy work, is you can get into all those cracks and crevices.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to identify what they are.
Right.
So getting back to your question, what can people expect in a session? Usually it's very much like what we're doing here. We're having a conversation, because what I'm doing is I'm actually tapping into the person's energy field.
Right.
And it's almost like a holographic impression that I get. And so your energy field is showing me where there's interference.
Okay.
And then what we're doing is we're kind of following step by step. And we're breaking up layer by layer to say, okay, this is showing up in your energy field, and this is why things are this way in your life.
Right.
Because of this. So as soon as we shift that energy, you're no longer going to magnetize or attract that particular issue, because that energy block or that interference or that attraction to that particular person or situation is no longer there.
Right.
So when we shift energy within your energy field, you're going to see it in your life. Some people feel a lightness right away. Some people feel voids being filled. Some people feel a propulsion in life to get them moving to where they want to be. Some people feel nothing at all, and that's actually
Right.
quite okay as well.
Mm-hmm.
All that means is that there's deep work happening beneath the surface, and it's not come up to the surface yet. Doesn't mean that nothing's happening, because everybody presents and comes to the table with something different.
Right.
Your past experiences, your family lineage, all of those things, your life purpose, all of those play a factor in this. But when we're dealing with energy, we can go so deep.
Right.
So some people will say, they'll have a certain question. I don't answer those questions. I actually answer the question behind the question.
Yes. And I know that you do that because, like I said, with our very first session that we ever had together, you pushed me into a place that I wasn't comfortable going into at first. But then I realized that I needed to go there in order to release what was to come. And I didn't even think we were going to get there in the very first session, but we definitely did. I even feel like you're even doing that right now. I felt a little bit of nerves that I had at the beginning of this interview, and I feel pretty good right now. But I think that's just a beautiful thing that you can do. I've always been in awe of you for this, and I've always been like, oh, I wish I could do this. And when did you kind of realize that you were able to even do this? I know you said you had gotten sick, and then you kind of started looking into Reiki and all that. But then was there like a spark that you could actually start seeing these fields and you could start feeling them? I'm assuming you're like empathetic, obviously, and you're an empath and you're psychic and you have these abilities. But was it after coming into contact with this particular virus, or you said you felt it when you were a child too?
Well, I would have to say that trip to Europe was kind of the starting point for me. So quite often there's a catalyst in our lives that kickstarts things. So for me, it was more of a very sequential process.
Right.
And you have to understand, I'm a very linear, head-based person.
Right.
So the way that I think about things, there's a lot of structure to it. And yes, I'm a Virgo, so there's a little bit of detail-oriented stuff that goes on with me.
Right.
But what I've also found is that everything happened at the time and how it should unfold. Not the way I wanted it to unfold.
Yeah. Which you always say that, and I love it. You say it's going to happen in divine time.
Yeah.
Everything's going to happen in divine time. So I really, really do love when you say that to me, because I'm like, okay, I just have to trust it. I just have to trust that things will happen when they need to happen that way. So.
And quite often it's because, I'm going to use the analogy of an iceberg. Quite often we want things to happen when we want them to happen.
Yeah.
And quite often that's yesterday.
Right.
And what people are looking at is when you see an iceberg, 20% of that surface is above the water. That's the stuff that you see.
Right.
And that's the stuff that people focus on.
Yeah.
Oh, here's my issue. This is what I want moved and shifted and released and whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
But what I work on is the entire iceberg.
Right.
Because you can't just break off a piece of the iceberg and ignore what's beneath the surface.
Right.
80% of that iceberg is under the surface, and that's the stuff that you don't see.
Yeah.
So quite often people say, well, I want to feel better by next week.
Right.
That's great. That's a great intention.
That's awesome. Good for you. Hope that happens for you.
But if it's taken you 100 lifetimes to get to this point where you've
Absolutely.
accumulated all this sediment and these patterns that are ingrained in you, guess what? We're going to work from the bottom of that iceberg to shift the entire thing, not just the stuff that you think is happening at the surface.
Right.
So that's very important for people to understand. It's not just what we want, it's what you need.
Right. And I think that is something that even to this day I'm learning, because I think I'm a bit of a control freak as well. So I was always trying to control every aspect of my life. And I'm starting to realize now, the more I give up control, the more things actually flow.
You know what, that's a great point that you bring up about flow, because quite often, again, when we're thinking from our minds, which we're conditioned and programmed to do, we want things to come a certain way. So we create a bottleneck because we've asked for something and we have an expectation of how it's going to show up. And that's how we're willing to receive it. Right. But what might happen is as you're clearing and as things are opening up for you, something far better might be waiting for you. You might be ready to step into it, but the limitations of the mind might not allow you to see that. So we create, like, this might be waiting for you, but you're saying, this is all I'm willing to receive because it's got to show up this way. Yeah. We create a bottleneck for ourselves. Right. And then we start second guessing, oh, well, this process isn't working, or what's happening here. Or what I find happens is sometimes things will come into our lives because it's going to help us unravel these patterns. They might not show up the way that you expect or idealize them or want them to be, but they show up perfectly. Right. It might be a person, it might be a situation, but if you say you're ready to move past something, and what will be presented will be an opportunity for you really to move past it. Right. And sometimes our old patterns will rear their ugly head, and you'll say, whoa. No, that's not what I want. That's not what I'm ready for. Right. But if you can kind of see that and recognize that and kind of push past it, you'd be amazed at what's waiting on the other side for you. It's the very thing that you've been asking for.
Yeah, and I honestly, I see so much truth in that now too, because I think for many years I was doing that. I think a lot of people do that. They put things aside that maybe they're afraid to kind of address, or things that they really want, but fear is again holding them back. I think that's another thing I want to talk about, because I find with you, after working with you, like I said, again, the channel became a thing for me. I was afraid to do this, and I think that was the first time I realized I could do this after talking to you. And I think it's because we worked through some of these energy blocks that I had, and a lot of that maybe drives back to past lives or even my childhood, where again, I didn't want to let anybody down. So I thought if I tried sometimes, I mean, I would overly try in certain things, and other things I would just not even go there, because I thought if I tried and I failed, then people would look at me and be like, you're a failure, right?
And also I'm going to interject here, is what happens is when you are more present, right, you can actually recognize the steps as they're showing up for you, right, to make your life easier. Right. Because if you're trying to figure it out from a logical standpoint, and you're trying to jump to the very last chapter to figure out what happens in the ending.
Me. That was me. Yeah. I was doing that all the time.
A lot of people do that.
Right.
What happens is we tend to oversee the beauty of what's actually taking place. Right. So you bring up a great point about fear, because fear shows up in so many different ways, and it kind of attacks us. It's like little mosquitoes, constantly like picking at us. So when we address certain aspects of fear, it's amazing how much can open up. But we don't realize how fear often shows up in our lives. And control is a huge part of that. Right. We implement aspects of control so that we can avoid fear. Because we think if we can control our lives, then things will turn out better, because my head is telling me so.
Yeah, it's complete opposite, because then you just end up building up more fear because you just won't do anything because you're just afraid to do everything.
Right.
It's a catch-22, that's for sure.
Yeah, so imagine if you don't have those barriers of fear, right, what can actually open up for you in your life. And the beauty is, so every emotion, every experience that we have, has an energetic imprint to it. Right. So we store those energies, and fear is one of those denser energies. So if you look at it kind of on a frequency scale, you've got the lighter emotions, and there's no judgment. Emotions are emotions. Right. There's beauty in everything, whether it's light or if it's dark light. Right. But when we're working with denser energies or denser frequencies within the scope of this work, what happens is there's something much, much bigger going on right now, where as a collective, the planet, all of humankind, is actually going through an evolutionary leap. Right. So what that means is the frequency that we vibrate at, our energy levels, is actually bumping up. Right. Very slowly. So what happens is some of these denser energies that were created once upon a time can no longer exist as we're climbing this ladder. So I think what we're seeing now is that everybody is really feeling this energy shift, I would say. And I think a lot of people keep asking, and I've heard a lot of people say it, like they know something's going on, but nobody really knows what it is, and they don't know how to really address it or deal with it, or even start to come to terms with it, really, in a lot of ways. And I've seen this with so many of like friends and family and stuff like that as well, where people are just going through really tough times right now.
And a lot of people are looking, again, for the very physical aspects to what is going on. And it's always like, oh, I can't sleep, so it must be something I'm doing. Or, I have this pain somewhere, so it must be that. And I kind of want to talk about that with you too, because I think that's something that's very important, because I think everybody is affected by this right now, and everybody is feeling it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just think that there's something wrong. And there's nothing per se that's actually wrong, and that this is something that we all need to go through.
Yeah,
so
actually, you're right. There's nothing wrong.
No, there's nothing wrong. Yes,
it's very, very right.
Right.
When you look at it from a different perspective, because what's happening is the things that don't serve us anymore, these denser energies, as we're moving through them, they're being shaken up. Right. In our energy field. So it's almost like an earthquake. When an earthquake doesn't generally feel comfortable when things are being shaken up.
Yeah, and they'll just kind of screw everything up around you. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's exactly what's happening. So often, again, people are going to resort to what they know. Okay, I can't sleep, so I should try A, B, or C, because that's what their database is telling them to do. But the beauty is, when you have so many tools to work from out there, like there are many, many different modalities out there that you can tap into that can help you accelerate the process. Right. You don't have to go through it step by step or layer by layer even anymore.
Right.
There's ways of effectively kind of sweeping things out.
Yes. And dealing with them and kind of going through them, because you're going to have to go through them. That's the thing I wanted to talk to a lot of people about it, because I think that's what's happening with a lot of people too. A lot of people just are continuously trying to ignore what's really going on in their life. And I think at this point, especially during this time, there is no more ignoring it. I think a lot of people are going to have to address these energies and this energy shift.
Yeah, you can't overlook it.
Right.
It's just like it's no different than if you're going through grade school. We all start off with kindergarten or grade 1 and we progress. Right. That's exactly what we're doing now. Right. So, don't expect too much of yourself too soon. You're not going to be reading a grade 10 book in grade 2, if you haven't learned correct semantics and grammar and words and whatnot. So that's kind of what's happening. Everybody's going through their own grade, and they're going through it at the pace that they need to go through it. Right. But you're right, you can't ignore it anymore. It is coming up. The more you try and push it away, the more difficult the process gets. Right. The more you're able to address it, the easier and the faster you will move through it. Because it doesn't serve you to hold on to these fears or these heavier energies that were created once upon a time. And the very thing that you're looking for is what's waiting for you on the other side. Because quite often people come to me and they say, I just want to feel better. Right. And that's what I help people do. Yeah. I help people connect to who they really are. Right. And that's by getting all these layers out of the way. Because all those layers have done is they just built up, and they've created circumstances by which you think you need to live your life by.
Belief systems, really, at best, is what it really is I think all of us have kind of grown up with all these belief systems or all of these programs that people kind of have instilled into us, starting with our parents and then, education system and other systems all throughout the world and social constructs and stuff like that. And I think at this point, people are just wanting to break free of all of that stuff and really find themselves. And I think that's what you're amazing at doing. You really help people find themselves, really, and kind of start getting through, like I said before, getting through some of these fears. And ultimately, for me personally, once we did address some of that stuff, some of the other physical stuff just went away. Yeah. Like it just started to disappear. Like I think even when I came to see you, I had gone through a really bad bout with my Crohn's disease. And I had been sick for a full year, like nearly on my deathbed. And I think at that point, everybody wanted to send me to the hospital because I had lost a lot of weight. I was feeling absolutely terrible. so I had to change out the battery because we were just joking about how you're playing with all the energy in my house and these cameras are overheating. So I had to change that out and the thing's gone crazy. So what are you doing to my camera?
It's amazing what happens when we raise the vibration.
Right.
And we're working with things at an energetic level.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I was on topic on something that I was saying. Oh, that's what I was saying actually. I was saying before I had to change out the battery, and before I screwed up my camera, was that when I had come to see you, I had been in a really dark place at that moment. Not at that particular moment, but for the year leading up to having seen you, because I got really sick. And there was times where I didn't think I was going to make it. And I know a lot of people were trying to force me to go to the hospital and deal with what was happening. But something intuitively told me that there was something more to come. And it's really, like this is going to be really weird, is that it actually told me, I had a dream, and I talked about this in other videos, that I had a dream about light, which ended up being finding this machine that we have in the house. And another thing was I kept hearing that I needed to wait till January. And we actually booked a session with you in, I think it was the second or third week of January of 2017, 2017. Which is just so weird because intuitively at that point, I knew I needed to come see you. Even though practitioners, like I said, a practitioner had told me about you before, but he had told me about you like maybe a year prior. And I kept putting it off until I couldn't put it off any further. And that's just primary. We're talking about how you just can't ignore this. Mm-hmm. The energy will make you, it will make you deal with what you need to deal with when the time comes.
Yeah.
And it will really force you into that. And like you say, everything will come with divine timing. And again, that's when I really found you and we started to work past that. And that's when I was saying before, literally I started healing my body. Yeah. My body started to heal at that point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because when you work at an energetic level, there's so much that's taking place. So yes, things will open up for you in your path, but also I just want to touch on this concept of energetic resonance.
Right.
So when you have certain energies that you're holding onto in your body or blockages or densities, what happens is you're going to attract certain things in your life, and those are going to play out through limitations, whether they're physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, kind of life path and life purpose, a number of things.
Right.
So once you address those, the energy that you're putting out there is now different because you've adjusted the frequency. Right. So the energy that we put out there and the energy that comes back to us, it's almost like a magnet.
Like this like attracts like sort of thing that you keep hearing about all over the place.
Yeah. So when you're no longer feeding or putting out that energy, there's no longer a need for something in your outer world to magnetize to it. Right. So that's how things start to shift in your outer world. And that's looking at things at a very secular level. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, that's how energy work shifts your life. We're working with the energy inside because we're constantly projecting energy into our outside world. And something in our outside world is going to magnetize to that to create these circumstances.
Right.
And so quite often, the very thing that you need or the very thing that you're putting out there is what you're attracting, but people have a hard time connecting those dots because they don't see it at that level.
Right.
So when we're working with energetics, we're looking at it at a very, very granular level.
Right. And that makes total sense. I think a lot of people, I've seen that just out in the world too, a lot of people are like, I don't understand why these things keep happening to me, or I don't understand why this is not working out for me. And it's really, you have to look at the person and you have to look at what they are putting out there. Yeah. And then they end up getting this back. I know a lot of people don't want to see that, especially in the chronic illness communities and stuff like that, because it is a very touchy subject. Yeah. But I've seen it a lot. Like, Kevin and I have done this in the past where we've gone to things like rallies and stuff like that, and instead of people even being more optimistic and hopeful about that, a lot of people kind of fall into this trap of blame, like this blame game too. And I think that's another thing I learned with you, is that I wanted to blame everything that was happening to me on everything, like not just like family or friends, but my entire environment. And I was always a victim to everything.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I started to realize that I'm not a victim and I created this reality for myself, and it's going to be me that needs to bring myself out of it. And I think, you know, consulting with somebody like you has really helped me in that with that aspect of it as well, because I couldn't see it before.
Yeah.
I was
that's just very hard concept to swallow for a lot of people.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is, and this is nice for people that are just getting into this now,
right,
is that we are working through these energies much, much faster than we have before.
Yes.
I mean, I've been at this for decades. I mean, this has been my life for a while. And some of the things that I've had to go through at an excruciatingly slow pace,
right,
it was very frustrating. And now I'm seeing people kind of, you know, pop open and have these awakenings and these awarenesses and, you know, shift their life completely. It's happening much, much faster. Yes. And that's because, again, these frequencies that we're tapping into are much higher. So you mentioned victimhood. Mm-hmm. That is one of those denser energies that kind of exists in the same plane as fear. Right. Because life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. But can you put those glasses on to see that this is happening for you for a reason? And once you're able to see the magic in that, things will start to open up for you.
Yes, and I totally, again, I agree 100%. And I think that's when both Kevin, and it's really weird, I can't really speak for Kevin, but I think even he was kind of skeptical of all of this when we first started out. He's more like the logical kind of guy, which of course now he's completely converted over and he's very spiritual. But he has even had to like really work past some of these things that he didn't even know were bothering him either. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason why I really wanted to have you here today is because I can tell everybody about this stuff, but obviously I'm not the professional. And that's why I wanted you to speak to all of our viewers about it today, because I think a lot of people will kind of put that aside and they, like I said before, deal with all the physical aspects of everything and not really give the emotional or even the spiritual aspects of it enough credit. And like you said, these energies are moving so quickly now that we really do need to address this. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on right now too, because we have to deal with these things now. And
some people use the term spiritual, and it's kind of an umbrella term for anything that you can't understand, that there's no logical proof for. Right. But you've got to remember, we are such complex beings. There's so much more to us than just what meets the eye. So when we talk about these victim energies, they are of a different vibration. So they're similar to the fear energies that we talked about earlier. So they have a lower vibration. So some of those energies can have a tighter grip on you. So sometimes it's harder to break free from some of those. But two things that are really important in those scenarios is people have to be ready to take responsibility for their lives. Right. And that's why I said fear can show up in many different ways. Right. And sometimes it can be so gripping that it just stops people in their tracks. But if you're ready to take responsibility, and there's a readiness factor, if you're truly ready for your life to open up, if you're truly ready for your life to improve, if you are truly ready to feel better, then things will start to happen in that direction for you. Yes. You know, if you're still digging in your heels and you're saying, but, then it means you're really not ready to move on. You're really not ready to let go of some of these patterns that you might be stuck in. And that's okay, because in due time, when you've really had enough of it, you'll start looking for answers and alternatives. There is no right or wrong time either. Okay. A lot of people tend to pass judgment on themselves and say, oh, well, if I had known about this sooner, I should have done this sooner. Remember earlier we were talking about those sequential steps. Right. That you need, you know, when you're dealing with the intricacies of energy, again, it's not just what the logical mind thinks that you have to deal with. There's so much beneath the surface. So you've got to clear out a lot of that, 80% of the iceberg before you move on to the next step. onto the next iceberg, into the next
Right.
iceberg. So don't beat yourself up, by saying, oh, I should have learned about this 10 years ago. No, you weren't ready for this stuff 10 years ago.
Yes, that I agree with 100% as well. A lot of people, I think, are coming around to this now. And I've actually heard people say that too, and they're like, oh, I've never really heard of any of this stuff, and now I kind of they need to kind of catch up. But that's not necessarily how energy really works.
No.
It's just, it comes to you when you need it, and like we've said before, it happens all in divine timing. And I think we have even some type of like a separation and segregation right now too, where a lot of people are like, oh, I keep seeing this all over the internet too. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm highly spiritual. I've known about this stuff for a very long time, but some people are not up to par with me yet. And I think that we're all in the same ball game at this point,
yes.
right? And
yes.
so we're all playing the same game. And I think at this point, everybody's kind of starting to understand all of this and are becoming more open to some of this stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just like with any other aspect of change, you're going to have people in the group that are the forerunners and that are ready and embracing it and kind of, experienced it before everybody else.
Yes.
And you're going to have the other people that are kind of tapping their heels saying, I'm not sure if I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
So you've got all aspects, but yes, we are moving together. We are moving as a collective. And there's so much that's happening out there that you can't really say one person, if you're at the front of the pack or the back of the pack, it doesn't really matter. There's no judgment. Right. We're all in this together. And again, it just means that you're moving through different patterns at different times in your life. And I'm just going to touch on this part too, because this is a key part of it. The families that we're born into, you're carrying around that backpack of sludge from generations and generations and generations ago. And you're having to clear that too. So it's not just your stuff. It's all the stuff that you were born into. And those are all patterns and those are all energetic imprints that you're dealing with. So cut yourself some slack, give yourself a break, don't be so hard on yourself, because you are moving through a lot more than what the eyes can see, or a lot more than what the head can understand.
Right. And again, I totally agree with you there. I think to just kind of touch on another thing that you've been doing, because I've been noticing with your work, Kevin and I in the past, we've had one-on-one sessions with you, kind of like this, just a conversation, and then of course moving through some of these energy blocks. But your work is kind of taking a different direction now as well, which you call energy transmissions, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So Kevin and I have done a few of them already. I think we've done a round of 6 or 7 sessions with you, and we found them both very profound, and the energy that we experienced from that was lasting. Like, it happened over the course of like 6 months, even after completing the transmissions with you. But can you kind of explain what is happening when you are doing these energy transmissions, and going forward, what these energy transmissions are going to entail specifically?
Absolutely. So traditionally, what I was doing was one-on-one consultations. And most of my work is done over the phone, because I work with people all over the globe. And some people say, well, how can you do that? You've got to be in person. Well, no, because I'm working with your energy body. I'm not working with your physical body. Right. So a lot of this work was done one-on-one basis. So again, working through those layers. And as I said, things are moving much faster now. So we don't have to go through it step by step like we once did. Mm. So as we evolve as people, the work and the energy evolves too. And that's what I have found. So going from one-on-one consultations, which presently I still offer, but I've now been able to create a way that's much more potent, that's much more effective and much more efficient. And that's what I call energy transmissions. And what these transmissions are very, very high frequency blasts of energy into your energy field. Right. And again, just like that analogy of where, water will find the path of least resistance to get where it needs to go. Mm-hmm. That's what these high frequency blasts do. They come into your energy field and they go exactly where you need them. You might not realize what that is, but it helps propel you in a very new way. Okay. So these have lasting effects, and they penetrate all layers of our energy field. So your physical body, your emotions, your mental state, your purpose or your life path or spirituality, whatever phrase they want to use to describe that part of your life. So with these transmissions, they can be sent out anywhere around the world at any time, and you sit there and you receive them. And some people can really feel it in their body. They'll feel certain sensations, and some people feel nothing at all. Right. And again, either one is no better than the other. They're both okay. But what happens is things start to open up for you, and they start to change very rapidly after these transmissions.
Yes, I can attest to that. They started happening very rapidly and lasted a good 6 months, I would say. So that was something that both Kevin and I both experienced. And you're going to be getting into a new, I believe you're going to be doing another round of them here shortly. Yeah. And I want to take part in that as well again. So, did you want to tell people how they could at this point, I know everything's kind of changing for you, and your website's changing, and I'm not sure if you're changing the name of your business and all that, but do you want to tell people how they could consult with you either directly or sign up for these energy transmissions?
Absolutely. The best thing to do would be to go to my website. You're free to email me. You're free to call me. We'll put the website.
Yeah, we'll put it down here below somewhere, so you guys will see that on the screen.
But it's Head to Heal, HEADTOHEAL.ca.
Okay.
And I do work with people all over the globe, so you can feel free to call me and we can discuss kind of the situation at hand. But remember, again, with these transmissions and with the work that I do, it's not all about feeding the mind. Right. I'm actually getting away from that because there's a lot of limitations with the mind. Because I found in telling people kind of what was going on for them, they would tend to hold on to those stories, and they would say, oh, well, I used to be a bad person once upon a time because I did this.
And then create a new manifestation for their life
going
forward. I know I'm guilty of this too, because you told me some things that I kind of held on to for the first year, and I kind of went around, and that was my story. At the same time, it was kind of a cool story, so I was like happy to tell people it, but you're right, you almost create this new vision, this new idea or ideal for who you once were or who you're going to become this time around. So I get why you would be moving in this direction as well.
Yeah, because things are much faster and they really propel you.
Right.
And the frequencies that are now available to us, these higher frequencies, again, as we're moving as a pack, we have access to so much more to go further and to go faster now. So if any of you are intrigued by this or you've got an inkling, so I invite you to follow up on that because that means that there's something inside of you that's being awakened, something that's being triggered, something deeper that's guiding you to something more.
Right.
So sometimes our head will get in the way and say, no, and it'll make up 100 different excuses. But if it feels deeper, if it feels right for you, look for something. There's so many resources out there, whether it doesn't have to be me, but there's all other kinds of modalities out there. There's courses, there's books. You're going to learn something, you're going to get something from every teaching that you have. And you will grow in and out of teachers and practitioners and different modalities, and that's quite okay as well. But it's all about your growth. Right. Your evolution. Right. And your betterment to your life. Absolutely. That's what it's all about.
Perfect, Susan. I think that's a great way to kind of wrap this up. If you wanted to say, is there anything else that you'd like to say? I know we were talking about perhaps offering some type of a discount or something like that, or we're going to do like a discount code. Did you want to talk about that a little bit? Or?
Sure, yeah. The first thing that I'd love to say to everybody is that we are all in this together.
Absolutely.
Nobody is alone. So even though you might feel really wonky or you might think, oh my gosh, why is this happening to me? No, it's happening to all of us and it's happening collectively. So don't feel like you're alone. Reach out. Have some support systems. Some people might not understand what you're saying, but there are resources out there. So connect with someone or something and get the help because things are a lot easier. They don't have to be as tough as they once were. Mm-hmm. And you can get through this.
Right.
So yes, I would love to offer your community, if they're intrigued by the work that I do, I'm willing to offer, a 10% kind of introductory discount. So
Awesome.
if you're seeing this video,
okay,
you can use the promo code DUO10, so
Okay.
DUO10.
So that's DUO10. We will put that right across the bottom here so that you guys can use that. And I think, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Just thanks for having me here, and thanks to all the viewers for watching and listening, because even having sat through this conversation and listened to what we had to say, it's already shifting things for people energetically, whether they realize it or not.
Absolutely.
The fact that they're receptive to this means that they're ready for something more. So
Perfect.
give yourself a pat on the back, viewers.
Everybody, pat on the back. And I just want to thank you again for spending the time with us today. I know you've been really busy, and like I said before, you flew in from BC and you have family here and a bunch of stuff that you're dealing with here. So I do really appreciate you being here today. So I wanted to say thank you so much for that. Not only for just this, but for everything that you have done for Kevin and I over the past 3 years. You have been a godsend for both of us. I don't think we could have worked past a lot of the things that we worked past in this lifetime without your help. I really don't think I would have been even made aware of some of this stuff. So I do really appreciate it, and I want to let you know that.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Thank you for sharing that. And I love this. This is what life is all about, to be able to share our gifts with others. So by me sharing what I do, it's enabling you to do what you're best at and helping other people. And as those people kind of grow into their own, they're going to turn around and help the next batch of people. Yeah. So that's how it works.
And that's exactly how Kevin and I see it. And that's pretty much why we're doing this and doing this channel. We're just trying to bring forth all the things that we've learned over the years, and kind of even bring forth some of the practitioners that we obviously have a lot of respect for as well. So thank you again. And thank you to all of you as well. If you guys liked this video, please like and subscribe to our channel and hit that bell in the I believe it's in the upper right hand corner, and that will send you guys notifications of when I upload new videos. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.